Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another virtual DDD. With me today, we have Krisztina and Matteo, and we're going to talk a bit about open source, something that we don't talk about a lot. But let's do our first introduction round. So let's start with you, Krisztina.
Yeah, hello, everybody. My name is Krisztina. I am a software developer, transformation something, director, I don't know, for a lot of years now. And I met Matteo 3 years ago in my very first open source collaboration. I met him in Git issues. And I'm very happy having him here today.
Good. Matteo, can you introduce yourself?
Yay! So I am Matteo Collina, technical director at Nearform. I don't know, big time open source contributor. I don't know. I've been working on developing open source stuff for almost the last decade in various fashion. I am a core contributor of Nodejs and a lot of other things in the JavaScript and NPM ecosystem. If you build anything with Node.js or React or front end overall, and you search and you grab my name in Node modules, you will probably see see it appearing on several times. So I am like, I don't know, my stuff has been downloaded some hundreds of millions of times per month, something like as stupid as that. As well as the contribution to Node.js itself. I'm also the author of a web framework called Fastify, which is a web framework for Node.js. You probably have used Express, but probably, there is a lot of reason for why you would not want to use that. And Fastify can kind of try to fix, to cater for those cases. So, yeah, that's kind of it. I am not a close practitioner of DDD. I need to say I am more of a loose practitioner, as I call myself, of that and a lot of other things. It's a great it's a great modeling tool. It's a great way of structuring things. It really depends on people if it fits or not an organization. So but even with that, you can tackle the same problem in different ways. So I'm friends with a lot of people that are really popular in the DDD world. So I'm a close friend of the community, essentially.
This is why you are here.
Hey.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Go on. So this is we're trying to go outside the boundaries of DDD and see what we can learn, right?
Yeah.
And that's why we're here, and that's why Krisztina invited you. So
yep.
Krisztina already told me she has a lot of questions. So the challenges we face in building software for businesses.
Yeah, I know.
What can we learn? How can we learn from building from what your experience is in the open source?
Okay, yeah. So let me start with the major difference between open source and business, developing code for open source purposes, and on a popular open source project. Let's focus on that. Not your own pet project, okay? A popular open source thingy, and developing code for your private company, for business, okay? Those two, I work on both sides of things. On one case, I'm just managing people. On the other, I'm actually developing code. The key difference between the two, normally, it's the primary metric is open source is typically very higher code quality versus it's very higher code quality than private and business software. It's really the key difference for that is where are the incentives and how where are the incentives, and one thing, and the other bit is where are the priorities. So let's go a little bit on the incentives and priorities for business software. Normal business software, you have your product manager and business that tells you all the time, ship, 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 to the point of those deranged situation where different individual, different team members of all the various team members are evaluated by the number of story points that they can ship on a week, on a given sprint. Okay, I've seen this happening. Okay, and it created such deranged situation where people listen, no, this ticket is done, even though it was super buggy and didn't work. But they say, no, it's done, just to collect their story points for the week.
So it's the focus on getting done. That's what I've witnessed as well, right? Yeah, this is done, but what about a test? No, yeah, there wasn't test anyway.
Yeah, exactly. You see, yeah, you see that it goes into that, and all of these is it's this type of culture is fostered by management. Now, even that is actually slightly changing even in the business world. And this needs to be recognized, because not everything is that pathological, and there is a big movement, especially starting from the DevOps community, of, well, let's track about quality, and let's the fact that shipping a defect in production as a cost, and it's a problematic. So let's keep that as a metric. And all of those things are really explored in the Accelerate book that if you probably have read, and you probably have friends this is, normally when I mention this to JavaScript people, they don't have read that book. Okay, so this is, that's most of I don't know why, but this is a typical thing that I'm coming into, and
I've seen big companies doing DevOps transformation and not even knowing the book.
Yeah.
Or doing agile and not even knowing who's.
Yeah, essentially, like I call it the range Scrum, where all of what Scrum wants to achieve goes into the bin, and essentially, and to be honest, they don't ship anything. Okay, so those type of situation is really bad. However, the pressure on the business side of things is on shipping features, shipping things, not maintenance, not quality, not defects. Nobody cares. Ship, 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 ship.
So how do you do that?
In the open source,
my question. In the open source, you don't have the pressure, of course, but
yes,
of a PO. But you probably don't have a PO in open source, right?
Yes, you don't have a PO. You don't have a PO. You might have some pressure. The biggest concern you have in open source is you want 0 defects. So when somebody sends in a contribution, the most important bit of thing that you want to achieve is to, okay, you're sending me this code, okay? You might, what I don't want to be at is to ship something to my user that then I would have to fix. So until I am convinced that your stuff is actually working correctly, I'm not going to land and ship that.
So a colleague of mine, and here's an interesting one. He said it really hard. He said the PO also needs to be on call, because if the team ships bugs, it also needs to be a concern of the PO you're shipping bugs.
Yeah, that's I like that. I like that attitude. So that would actually be really that would actually help. So it's but that's kind of the situation in open source. If typically the maintainer team is actually normally on a large project is normally conservative and in retaining the quality of what it's in there. and they will do code reviews, multiple levels of code reviews. A PR can take a new feature can take months to ship. In Node.js, we were able to ship a feature that was being developed for 2 years because it was stuck, because somebody was not we were not capable of actually testing it. It was a features about IPv6 and like some very nitty-gritty details about the network stack. So, something not really with a big audience, but we are not capable of actually doing tests without having root access of the machine, essentially.
But you see, here's another difference, because I wouldn't ship a feature in a business which is 2 years old.
You see, but that is the difference of open source versus the time of open source versus the time of business. So there is the gap between those two things. It's significant, because now somebody in that feature was stuck for 2 years because essentially the first guy that contributed the thing couldn't figure out how to write the test for it. Somebody else needed it at some point and just stepped in and actually figured it out.
Okay, this is the reason why it still was shipped, but wouldn't you normally delete it or reject it? Or?
Yeah, maybe, but then somebody else will pick it up eventually and that's send it again, okay? So the code is never, once it's there, it's never deleted, so it only accumulates. So it's a fork and leaves, unless somebody deletes the fork, but normally, no, like if you've sent, you see, that's what we do. It's a lot. It's a big shot. It's kind of a moonshot, but it's, you do a feature and then it sits there, rot there forever. If you can't ship it, then if somebody else needs it, they would.
So this comes to my question, like domain discovery. In business, you are doing a lot of domain discovery. What exactly is our business? What would you want to? What is our unique selling point, and so on? How do you do it in Fastify or in Node? Node is easier, but what about Fastify?
Well, okay, so the Node and Fastify are very different in that regard.
Yeah,
okay,
I think so. Yeah,
those were completely two different paths. So let's talk about Fastify first. I'm going to Node later on. So Fastify, the reason why Fastify was born was, I don't want to use any other framework. I don't like any other of them. I have my own personal pain. Let's see if there are any other people that feels painful to use any other frameworks. And there were a lot of reasons why I didn't want to use Express, didn't want to use Happy, didn't want to use Restify. I didn't want to use any of those. Didn't want to use Koa, okay? And they all had things that were blocking me from doing the type of Node.js development that I wanted to have.
So this is already an interesting point here. Is Nick Tune always talks about eating your own dog food.
Yes,
when you're in business, right?
I work for a consultancy company. Okay, we develop Node application backend with Node.js application all the time. So the problem there was very real. We needed something stable that had a certain level of feature, a certain level of performance, with a certain level of speed of development, and a certain stability in production.
Yeah, and it's also quick feedback because you're your own user.
To be honest,
building software that you use yourself.
It was not, yes, to some extent, because it took Nearform 1.5 - 2 years to actually see, holy cow, you have actually developed something great there. Okay, so it took Nearform a few. Yeah,
okay, but what I mean is, if you look at, for instance, we were talking about Meetup, and you can ask questions up front, and they end up somewhere vaguely in a member list, and I'm like, is this person who built that software, is this person actually using this function themselves or not?
Oh yeah, totally. Like all of Fastify and Pino, both Pino, which is my logger, and Fastify, were totally born of me being pissed.
Yeah.
Literally, like that is, if you, so there is a key theme on me that don't do it, but this is a secret arm. don't piss me off, because then I will develop some software to prove it, to prove it. So essentially that was, the top recent, there is a top recent example. We developed this at Nearform. This is a new module. It's called Fast JWT. So it's a really, really fast module to parse and verify JWT tokens. I'm passing it in the chat here, but it's probably going to some YouTube info box at some point. So it's this is again scratching our own itch. We have seen this problem so many times. JWT parsing was low, was a bottleneck. We went and developed a solution to actually solve the problem. Not inventing anything new, we just took the best of other techniques that were already available. So it's nothing strange, but it's building something that actually solves a problem.
So the domain discovery is your nerve. You are the domain.
I am the domain. Yeah, I am. To be honest, that is what it's essentially. We have a business problem. We have a technical problem in one of our clients, and that technical problem, we cannot fix that technical problem on the first iteration when we develop that product. We kind of log this type of, after 1, 2, 3 instance of that same problem, we decided, okay, let's try to design a solution and allocate some budget and person to actually develop something to fill in that gap. Okay.
And
yeah,
what about
I think
yeah
to recap a bit here, I think what we can learn is, what I see usually is that developers only want to develop and push code, but in a business domain, it's also good to either do the tests or use the program yourself, so that you can get your feedback yourself. And I wonder how many people actually do that, right?
It's actually speeding up
software yourself.
Speeding up the internal company development. So if you are going to develop the same thing, having a reusable piece of code to be able to reuse it in the future and have it really solid with proper testing and maintenance and so on, is actually very powerful. So it can actually save time next time. And when there is, idle times, so there's not, especially we are a consultancy, so when there's, peak times and busy times and not busy times. So when the capacity curve is low, when we have a lot of capacity available, we actually invest money in this as Nearform, essentially. But as myself as well, to be honest. So there are moments in the year where I have more time and less time, and then I build stuff or not build stuff. So there are these two sides of this flow, and essentially trying to speed things up and advance the ecosystem. So it's a constant competition to speed things up, and so. And this is, I started doing this as myself long time ago, and then this becomes a little bit of the ethos of part. This was kind of my contribution to one of my contributions to Nearform as a concept on reusing stuff.
Exactly, and then you started this project because it pisses you off and you need a solution.
Yes.
But later on, all the successful, or not all, but the successful open source projects are they changing, or will they?
No, it depends. So it is that goes into the community aspect of it. So I might be, you don't want to fall into the ego trap.
Yeah.
So there is the ego trap. So when I was starting with both the logger and the web framework, they came from very specific business needs. So I clearly had a clear idea where I wanted to go, because of, okay, I have these clients that will need this. I have these clients that will need this, To some extent, all the clients have these problems, so I can actually build a library that will fix it for all of them.
Yeah.
Now, the flip is on I never decided to do them alone. So I typically try to talk on Twitter or other peer and check if they feel the same, if they have the same ideas on the same kind of problems. If they do, if they can get them engaged, then we can possibly move forward into the topic. So
this challenging and verifying the idea is, I think, that's really, really important.
Yeah, it's actually like try. So with Fastify, when we started Fastify, I said, well, I need to convince another human being to work with me on that, because that is the key description of like, because you want to have the validation and growth. So
not another node framework, yeah.
Not another node framework, but not another node framework. Yeah, that was it true.
Yeah.
So a community, not another node framework. So because there are too many of those, like, and one thing that if a piece of software is complex, I also always ask the same questions to everybody. Please check how many maintainers that piece of software has. And if it's complex and it has only one maintainer, maybe you don't want to use it.
Kenny, I don't want to remember you that I told you yesterday exactly the same thing. Please don't use it. It's one maintainer.
If it's one maintainer, don't use it. I agree.
And it has Git incorporated. No. Okay. So though we had this domain discovery, and the domain is actually some problems and some ideas from you, and discovery is community questions, community discussion. What about ubiquitous language? This is the main concept in DDD, to speak the same language, the language of the domain.
This is very tricky, okay? Yeah. And it really depends on the project itself. So this does not come easy in open source. In a lot of cases, you have a spec at some point. So you have that your language is partially derived as an extension of that spec.
Yeah.
So for Fastify, there is an HTTP framework, comes from the HTTP spec. On top of that, you need to define what are your key entities and key pieces and clearly document them. And but implementing a spec or implementing something like that is actually very easy. If you are implementing something a little bit more complex, that is, more abstract and so on, you will need to do a little bit more of modeling on that side. With Fastify, we didn't do that. We just more or less follow the spec. So you have a method, we have a request, there's a response, and that was the major language. But we didn't do any of language, any language check or anything. In other cases, it's actually very important. So let me completely flip aside the problem, make a completely reversed example, where actually having a language was actually critical for shipping something. So in Node.js, at some point, long time ago, talking 3 years ago, something like that, more or less when Fastify was born or some over that time, we were trying to implement the what became stabilized at async hooks. Okay, and one of the key problem on async hooks was the lack of ubiquitous language, and the fact that there was a lack of a meta model of what a continuation in JavaScript was, and what were the terms that we will need to use to talk about that. Because people were talking in the issues at that point in time, not communicating with each other, which is a typical sign where a DDD approach would actually help. So some bit of research team from Microsoft wrote a paper, literally, describing the asynchronous modeling, the modeling of asynchronous flow in JavaScript.
Yeah.
Because it was never even modeled, nobody even wrote down what was the abstract model for that type of flow. Which, thinking it was just evolved. It's crazy, but there was no abstract concept of it.
Yeah.
Which means that if there's no abstract content, you can't have you don't have a actual language to talk about.
Exactly.
That. So and
uh,
that
did-
was
did-
actually instrumental of evolving the concepts and shipping some sort of, what we were able to ship later on, and more or less, it's not stable, but it works. So on that concept of async hooks and continuation local storage, asynchronous local storage, and so on.
So one big thing that we do in DDD is collaborative modeling, right? Put the right people in a room and
Yes.
whiteboard sessions, mock
Yes.
programming, whatever. That's different in open source.
No.
You still
No.
do the same.
Well, we stick people in the room, really. Like
Yeah.
if you have a big complex project like Node.js, we typically do once or twice a year. Now this year is all over, so forget 2020. Up to 2019, we were doing 2 times per year, where we all meet either in Europe or in the US. One time in Europe, one time in the US, with a lot of meeting rooms, so people could actually talk and discuss and design new things, or talk about where they wanted the project to go, and so on, together, so they could actually design new components, new areas and things.
Okay, but this is Node.js, which is a special kind of open source.
Well, it's 100-something open source, so
Yeah.
you need that doesn't change though, because in a meeting room there will be 8, 10, 15 people. So it's essentially a team size, okay? So, but it's almost always a team size. So you have, in order to do to ship modules, ESM, I don't know if you are familiar, how many of you use JavaScript, but there is this new thing called native ESM. I don't want to enter the topic, but
No, we won't.
essentially all of these was started as long design sessions in people stuck in a room discussing options. And again, even that, there was a long list of things that was tackled in a very DDD-like approach in terms of modeling and the user flows, like a lot of the concepts and the ubiquitous language and so on, to actually be able to talk about the problem. That it's to some extent, the modules grouping group is actually an example of a community that has adopted its own ubiquitous language, which unfortunately, and this is a bad thing to some extent, it's that it creates a barrier to entry, which, if you are in a business setting, it's actually a nice thing, because then once you are in, you are in a group because somebody placed you in a group. So you will learn the language and then you'll be done. But if you are in open source where you will want to contribute to something, having an ubiquitous language that is, how do you talk about that topic and how do you present things, is actually a little bit of a barrier to entry, because the person that reads the topic says, what the heck is this? Okay. And will not be able to understand. So on the topic of the language, there is back and forth.
So how do you deal with that in open source?
Well, you
Right,
keep it. So to be honest, it's you keep it simple. As much as I will say keep it simple. So, but a lot of time you don't, and you become a little bit elitist. That's what's happening on the most complex topic. You become elitist, essentially. I'm not a fan of it, and I'm not very proud of it, because you want to be collaborative and inclusive and so on. What happens is that in the most complex situation, when the language to some extent evolves to talk about certain things, it requires a significant investment for casual contributors. So you cannot be a passerby on something. You need to actually put in several hours, much time to actually, start understanding what's.
But it's not a sign that not that only one group of people is in these modeling sessions and not totally different users. It is not possible, of course, to get people from the street and ask, do you use Node? Come with me. But to become elitist, I think it happens because you don't hear other opinions.
Yeah, no, it's not even that. The problem is budget allocation. It's essentially if to understand a topic, you need to spend, I don't know, 200 hours studying it.
Okay, that's too much. Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah.
Not
I
to be
guess
able to
there's
do any contribution, just to be able to understand what the people are talking about.
Yeah, and I guess there's a balance, right? You don't want to get fed up with all these code commits that becomes buggy, so you don't have passerbyers. Just
Yeah, but that's not
randomly.
the problem. So what I'm talking about, so let's separate this a little bit, okay? So one of the problem is somebody contributing a bug fix.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problem is designing a completely new feature or a completely new domain or a completely new component, which can be extremely complex and possibly backed by a spec that is as complex as, if I try to read it, you start banging your head on the screen. I start banging the head on the screen and say, no, I'm not spending the time.
Yeah.
So that is the barrier.
Yeah, so you need to have people who really want to invest anyway. So that might actually be a good thing.
It's not. It's just as it is. Okay, so it's not neither good.
Node is a bad example because we cannot compare Node with. We can compare writing a language.
Yeah, but that's that gives you. So I just wanted to make an example of Fastify versus Node because they have different level of complexity. So one is way 10 times several order of magnitude simpler than the other. And, working with Node is actually really hard. And you need to, in a lot of cases, we are talking about, like, in order to ship a certain features, maybe 15, 20 people worked on it. And you actually see, oh, we have a nice new features on Node 14. And you have 20, 30, 40, 50 people, whatever, has worked on this thing for like 2-3 years. And you say, oh, new feature is a line on the new major. Oh, okay. And then, but it's needed for supporting a lot of use cases and so on. So, but then this means a lot of people have worked on it, decided, discussed trade-offs. And the reason for that is because we have a consensus seeking model. So we are doing this consensus seeking thing. So there's no BDFL. If there is a BDFL, that's a completely benevolent dictator for life. So if there is a dictator, he can say, well, we do this, and then it's fine. What you want in the Node model, we have diffused ownership. So you want to strike a balance between all the people involved.
Yeah. You meant Linux with the dictator?
Yes, exactly. It's the last one, essentially.
Yeah.
So go on, Krisztina.
We talk all the time about technology. Is open source software only technology driven? Is this the only heuristic which is important? Can it be business driven, or do we need always a reason because of some bugs or this server, I don't like it and I need a new one? Everything is technology driven, but not business driven.
It depends.
I don't know.
It depends. So a lot of typically there is a business need at some point, which is, I want to do this, I can't, so let's build some tech for it. Okay. And
as a starting point, sure.
At the starting point, and then it blurs.
Okay, but later on, it is always technology discussions.
it depends. So it's typically yes, because you are not shipping feature like business features on open source. So you're not, you're not shipping user management system on open source most of the time.
Yeah.
You are shipping a web framework or whatever, but it's not much business decisions happening. So it's mainly technological. The discussion is mainly technical. The business decisions are really pushed on the private code, and they might need this feature. So let me make an example. Okay, I'm working on a multi-tenant app, and these multi-tenant, depending on some part of the user profiles and some metadata, needs to be routed to different shards. Sorry, no, it's not multi-tenant. It's a sharded application, loads of millions of users, and there is need to send to one set of shard to one shard or another shard, and they are fully vertical shards to handle the scale. And this is actually a significant scalability problem. And what we've done is, and what they've done, they needed to develop a custom HTTP gateway, which essentially have this smart logic to pick one decision or the other, to send it one way or the other, essentially. So there are a lot of other cases where you want to build. This is one example, but there are other cases when you want to build custom, code-based gateways. There are a few options. You could buy Kong or Nginx. You can deploy Lua in Nginx. I don't know how many of you have deployed some Lua in Nginx, but it's, Lua in Nginx is a thing. I just don't want to go too much into that detail, but it's very hard. But you can actually script Nginx with Lua, so you can put some of that logic in Nginx. We ended up developing some custom Fastify module to do that with some really good perf. So that's it. So that's the bottom line of it. I just wanted to make an example of, there is a business need and gets sublimated into some technology reason, and then that technology part can actually be made open source because it has no business value.
There is business value, but no business knowledge.
But there's business value, but not business knowledge. And the fact of keeping it open source, or other can chime in, use it, and maybe fix bugs, that is actually really, really powerful.
Okay. Question maybe related to this, right? We're talking about that it's really technical, and we were previously discussing a bit more about people making features and where distributed, how do you say it? The multiple people decide. You're a consensus model.
Yes.
How do you, in that consensus model, how do you decide if people, how do you include people? So let's say I now want to help you on one of these open source, right? But I'm really novel in my experience.
I don't understand the question.
So how do, if I want to contribute to OSS and I want to contribute on a new feature, do you do that in your open source open for everyone? Everyone can just join in and be included as a contributor?
It depends. So there is, in the Node community, there is a concept of the collaborator, which is somebody that has contributed either with code or issues or working on infrastructure, whatever, some significant amount of things. And then we go with a consensus seeking, which means does anybody object? So you don't need approval, you just need to say no. And you need to motivate the no. Okay, and then in Node.js, we have a body which we can escalate to, which is the TSC, which is the Technical Steering Committee, which can say if some two collaborators do not agree with each other, essentially it makes a decision.
This is what I like. Not saying yes, but but not saying veto. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
okay for can everybody live with it? It's acceptable, has the level of quality what we need, or is somebody against?
Yeah, so in some cases, it seems like it is the thing. If you say yes on a feature, you are claiming co-ownership of that feature. So, if what you have LGTM and landed as a bug, then if that is a regression, you will be pinged. Oh, you didn't spot this. How come? Again, the focus is on quality on open source. Okay.
Yeah, and to do that question right, a problem people see is some shops don't have experience in building software using the quality practices. Why would that be so different in OSS than for instance, in business development? And
Because,
we talked about
your users are different. Your users and your code is in public. Everybody can see it and say, what the shit?
No, it's not the problem. That's not the problem. That's not the problem. The major problem really is the fact that so if you put something on open source, you are actually taking ownership of that code. So you need to maintain it forever, essentially. If you're doing it on business, you can say, your PO or your business side can say, well, I want this tomorrow, even if it's a piece of shit.
Yeah, and you won't be tagged or publicly, nobody will look at your publicly.
So I think this is very
business.
It was 10 years ago, maybe, but you have checked in. You are working. You are a person. You are not only somebody pushing some code and leaving. So
well, it is the problem. The big disconnect is, what I'm seeing is there is a different level of, as I said, there is a different focus. Okay.
Yeah.
On one side is long-term maintainability of something. On the other side is shipping features and have low defects later on. Okay. Now the low defect is just a very recent addition to the thing, because I've seen so many up to very not so long ago. I've seen teams only focusing on story points.
Oh, that's what Scrum teaches them as well.
Yes.
Dark
okay. So
Scrum.
the only metric are story points. Okay. Sorry, just to be clear. That's my main enemy. Okay. I don't like story points. They are completely a waste of space.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody uses them, but they're total waste. This is not a good metric for measuring success of a project. Okay, because things can be changed so much time. The only thing you're measuring is the how good you are at creating story points. So that's the only part.
So you're a consultant. What do you do when you go to a company and they say, we're working with story points?
No, we do. We work with story points like everybody else. It's just that we don't keep it as this big level of, this is the golden truth of the story points and the burn chart. It's more of, okay, we have this bunch of story points. We probably ship in a few months, and then we follow more extreme programming flow or agile with a small a than Scrum. We're not a Scrum company. So we do a lot of the things of extreme programming and a lot of the things that you do with the addition of retrospective. We do a lot of the Scrum ceremony without the big stamp and kind of adapting at the team. And to be honest, like running retros most of the time is useless. So why waste time? And after a few cycles, there's no big time in no reason to have a retro at all. Like it was a team. I said, well, what are the key frustrations? Those 5. Okay. Why are we wasting an hour? It's because they were outside of the scope of a team. And so it really depends on the team itself and what are the priorities. So most of the time we work on the we create story points, we do the planning, we do a lot of those. It's just the reporting and burn charts. It's not. That's what we don't do.
Exactly, because not story points is fault if somebody is misusing them.
It's not a good metric.
It's not a metric. It should not be entered in any Excel sheet or whatever bullshit. But if it helps,
it's not a metric. So if you track that metric, you're kind of
the tracking is the problem. Yeah.
You are, because essentially you create a culture where you're removing collaboration.
Yeah, well, it's essentially also the what was it, Brooks law? If a metrics becomes a target, it's not a good metric anymore.
Yeah, it becomes a target. So essentially, that is
seeking the wrong goal. It's also the system trap.
Exactly. It never were. The idea was never were to use it as a metric.
Yeah, but that's more or less what Scrum does. But yeah, well, not Scrum, but the deranged. I call it deranged Scrum.
Thank you, because it's not Scrum and it's not story points.
But that's what people intend when they talk about Scrum.
Yeah. I work in situations.
The average Scrum consultant teaches them to do that.
Oh, this average Scrum consultant, it's the safe guy. It's okay.
They have a Scrum camp. They are certified. And they teach. They tell you to have a burn chart and tell you how much you're burning and so on.
Because you let them in. Why do you have somebody with a certified Scrum?
Well, that's a completely different.
That's a problem.
That's the problem, but that's the kind of problem where we are heading to. And
so I disagree a bit that it's a bad metric. I think it's a good metric.
I think it's terrible.
Target. That's a difference there.
So
I worked on a project a project where we did this, and based on the features, because we knew what we needed to build. The PO actually had the chart, and we didn't use it as a target, as in blah blah blah, but we used it as a decision-making thing. Do you understand?
Okay, let me make a clear example.
What was a decision? What are we going to choose?
Let me make. When I talked about deranged, let me make a clear example. Okay, so a company was really performance focused. So what they did was, okay, you have your story points. You need to, every developer needs to achieve 20 story points per week, or 8 or 5, whatever it is.
Exactly.
Okay. If they don't for a few weeks, they're fired.
Yeah, that's a really toxic one. And
this is real, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I've still been in a situation where they were asking me, because they need some continuous improvement thing, right? Yeah, they get 60 points per sprint, and how many points would it take? I say, I don't care, just do 10% and let them do 10%. And then they ask me for Jira epics. I'm like, no, that's not the point of the points. The point of the points is that you can track them and look back and maybe look forward, but not as a target operating thing and planning a project and planning how much does something fit. No,
did you ever do the same feature twice with the same constellation, same people?
No, of course not.
So why the point? It's apples and burns. You cannot compare them.
So I have but that's my main concern. So it's essentially that's where we had the major problems. The key part is when they are used to measure the success of a team, and where it's attached to the as a KPI of
evaluation
on the evaluation of a team or individuals.
It's the same, the line of code KPI, right?
It's the same. No, it's actually worse than the line of code KPI for my point, because I can cheat that very quickly. It's the story point. If you see, because I can put, I'm taking some lines from. So a friend of mine was actually at some point in this game, and he started putting Shakespeare poems as comments in the code base. So the tool was actually counting the Shakespeare poems.
No, but I can game story points as well. I can just say this feature will take 8.
Yes, essentially. So you create those.
While it is maybe 3. So I say it's 8.
What is 3?
Why is it 8? You need to do it for 3. No, it's 8, and else I won't do it. So
thank you.
That's a wrong discussion, but I can game it.
You just proved it doesn't. Story points are
that's the wrong discussion.
Story points are beans.
Yeah, if you use it as a plugin planning tool, they are okay. If you use them as a measurement tool,
target
is actually horrible. So then it also creates some very, very bad dynamics. So essentially, this is another bad dynamic, the story point. We are going out of topic.
Out of our topic.
But it's worthwhile talking. So
it's a big difference between open source and business.
Well, yeah, there is. So the story points. So if your team has a certain level of story points that they need to achieve, and they want certain things that they want to ship, and there is, for some reason, a team member that is struggling a lot. Okay, normal. It's not up to it's not at the same level of others.
It's normal, yeah.
It's a more junior position. Okay.
Yeah.
So
that's
what I have seen really smart people do, where story points were the KPI, was leave this person alone, essentially chop it off from the team, and overwork themselves.
Yeah.
Which is
toxic.
Which is toxic.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Which is not sustainable. They burned up. To be honest, they all burned out. So
yeah,
and they had to rotate out most of that team. So the end result was rotating out most of that team because it created a dynamic that was not working. So they had to change team lead because it allowed that to happen. It changed the person that was left alone because it was like, it was in a very depressed situation. You can imagine why. And then they also changed some other members because it was not feasible, sustainable.
Yeah. So it's a good question from someone on Zoom here. It's have you ever felt like that yourself in open source, being burned out because and not worth investing time anymore? So what did you do in order to align with thought and still be active in the community?
Okay.
So have you ever thought like, and it's a personal question.
I have about this into my recent talk at OpenJS World, which is at some point long time ago, I was very active into the Internet of Things community. I'm not active in that community anymore, to be clear. I did a PhD thesis on that field. Essentially, I wrote some papers on it. Nobody cared about my research when I was doing it. Now my research is hot to some extent. Like my top paper, let me check, scholar.google.com, and let me check, and my profile here, and my top paper has been cited 124 times. Pretty happy about this. Okay. And and the second one, it's like 85. So to be honest, my research has not been that crap. However, what happened was that at that point in time, nobody was caring about my thing. And I was releasing all of the things that I was doing as open source. and I develop an MQTT broker, Mosca. MQTT is a protocol for the Internet of Things, PubSub style, for connecting the servers with devices on the field. And what happened was that I got into the eye of a serial entrepreneur. This serial entrepreneur business model is phenomenal, by the way. I love it. What he does, it takes open source things in the community. It's stick themselves together with nice marketing, call it a startup, raise capital in San Francisco because he has access to some friends, because he has done it several times. So the VCs are really willing to give him money, and sell it for going for an acqui-hire. And then once it's acquired, rewrite the full thing because there is no tech value. It's only marketing. And this person did this to me and a few others in the Internet of Things JavaScript community. And that was really a bad moment for me. And I decided, well, what the heck, I'm doing any of this. So I completely stopped maintaining that project, essentially burning him. I'm not maintaining this, so if you want, you are on your own. I'm not spending any effort. And then that's it. I said I was only maintaining it when I stopped helping people. There is a difference between there is a bug and you demonstrate that there is a bug, and I'm helping you using my software. Okay, let's see the difference between Stack Overflow versus GitHub issues to some extent. Okay, like the barrier. I'm not interested into participating in. I'm helping you using my software. I'm very interested in participating to that if you pay me. Yes, very interested. So if you want, this is I can send you my bank account's coordinates, drop money, or my Bitcoin wallet, or my PayPal account, just drop money. I'm very happy to help you. But I'm not helping people using my stuff for free. So if there is a bug, yes, 100%. I'm happy to help and check and diagnose if I consider it a bug that I can be hit with. If you're trying if it's a bug that you have because you're doing something that I will never be doing, I'm accepting a contribution.
Yeah. So thanks. And so is the main reason you are an open source contributor is mainly that you also use it yourself?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And if there's a bug that someone else catched that you created, then great. I'm also annoyed by this bug because I'm using it myself. But features that someone, and I've seen that before in the open source, I'm not sure if you have dealt with it a lot, that other people want you to add this or add that. And they're like, well, I'm not dealing with this problem.
Yeah. Well, it goes in the same box of, put money in the pot, please.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to recap, because I think we're also going to a closure. I think that's the main point also that we can learn from open source as DDD practitioners is, and I think that's the main difference. You write open source for yourself.
Yes.
Because you have a problem.
Yes.
And what I see usually in business development and DDD using it in businesses, the people don't feel the problem. They don't know. I've actually had developers saying they actually wanted to. They actually say, yeah, let me write with these people on the bus where we write software for. And then people are saying, no, we can help. We can let you. Well, actually, what I think the heuristic is really nice is make sure the developers of the business software experience the same problem as the user would.
Yes.
Because then you have an intrinsic incentive to work on it. instead of here's money and just code monkey.
And not only you have respect, you know what you are doing. You
Yeah.
the
Faster
expectations
feedback.
are not. You have feedback. You have instant feedback.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is where we are going with examples, with specifications by examples. You have at least something touchable. But the best thing, I'm asking for a week now to my clients, please give me your UX results. I want to see where the people are jumping out, why they are happening. Or call center people, I would like to talk with the call center people who is receiving my emails, and I don't know if they are using it, if it's good enough or not. And I think your imagine, Matteo, I hope it's old and not, and we move away from that, because a lot of people are wanting to know what they're doing, and they don't want to ship story points, but to know what they're doing, to go via domain-driven knowledge, to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Big enterprises, surely not. They are surely too big. They cannot have, I don't know how they are working with thousands of people, not to be a number, somebody checking in and leaving. But smaller one must go in the near
even
user.
big companies. So I'm working with one of my clients. It's a big e-commerce, and they actually work with an approach of domain-driven design combined with microservices architecture, combined with like small teams, a lot of automation.
Autonomous teams.
Yeah, it's you can actually achieve that same level of speed and ownership of the problem with a small team, but it needs to be autonomous. It needs to be small, and those people needs to be very. They need to be passionate about the problem, so they need to feel the problem.
Exactly, and this is the common thing.
Or to some extent, even be curious about the problem. So you need to be curious about, what is this domain about? Okay, how can I study this domain, and how can I learn very much the details of this domain, the ins and outs. Now, having worked to the point that when I was doing we were talking to them, they were running expert by domain. So they didn't care much if you knew Java or .NET or Node.js or Python or Go. They only care, okay, have you worked in the past in this domain, in this industry?
Yeah.
And technology I can teach you, whatever, you will learn.
Exactly.
And I'm actually only hiring you because you have an expert on this specific bit, and I'm placing you on that team.
So, that's interesting. My second job was a contractor for a big company, working for a different company, and they sent me on a course in asset management because that's what they did. They say you go to asset management and learn what asset management is, and it helped me a lot to understand actually what the problems are. At that degree that I vowed myself that I never will trade in assets again because it was all gambling.
But this is the common thing, and this is where we have to go, and this is why I asked Matteo to come to have this session, because for me, I had a very small contribution, but it changed a lot of things, how I see things. Respect, ownership, exactly what you said. If you're publishing anything, even a contribution, you are owner, and you are proud, and you want to make something good, and you are interested for this. And I die when I see people shouting, "Hey, why is this software buggy? Please solve it." You can't create this bug fix and stop shouting. It's your responsibility if you are shouting. And this is what can happen, should happen in business too. It's not the responsibility of QA or review or PO or whoever. The user are using the right software wrong, but my responsibility. So I have to know what the domain is. And this is what in open source happens all the time. The domain is technical, sure, but it is a concrete question or a problem, and somebody wanting to fix it has to understand it very, very well. It doesn't matter if it's technologically or not.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Matteo. And thank you, Krisztina, for inviting Matteo. We're
Thank
wrapping
you.
up. And
Thank you for having me.
We're wrapping up with one quick final question, a checkout. What
Hey.
practice from the OS community should every organization adapt? So Matteo, what's your take?
Code reviews.
Code reviews.
Yes.
Good?
Code reviews and not quick LGTM code reviews. So it's kind of a big shift in terms of how you schedule work for a team. Essentially, it has a few bits of impact. So if you're working on a feature and you're sending a pull request for a code review, you want to have a turnaround on that code review in some time. Now you're working in an asynchronous, you want to work in an asynchronous fashion. So you want to leave sitting there, I don't know, half a day or a day for some other colleagues to pick it up and review, which means you are idle for that time. So you need to pick a new task. So it increases the work in progress of the team. It at least double the work in progress of a given team. Which has as we all know, it has certain impacts on the actual speed and delivery and so on and so forth. However, on the other side, it lowers defects and it increases quality. So there is that. So
Code review is code review. It doesn't have to make it slower. You just have to make it.
Essentially, that is the key difference between open source. Like the problem with open source is the WIP, okay, and how you manage the WIP of a project, and you can model that. And on the business side, and this WIP tend to grow infinitely. On the business side, instead, if you want to ship, you want the WIP to be very small, okay. So however, I think the balance is, even on the business side, you can actually increase the WIP in order to increase the end quality of a project. Essentially enabling people to, do a code review, iterate on that, but in the meanwhile, while you're waiting for feedbacks, they can actually pick something else. So they're not sitting idle, essentially. And this is also a way to scaling teams and working in a distributed manner. You can, if you, in a more traditional agile setting, you are collocated and you might do pairing. So you might ask a colleague of yours, hey, please, buddy, come by. Hey, let's look at this code together. No code review needed. He looked at it now.
Yeah.
So, and however, I'm working alone on my computer. You want with a remote fashion and so on and so forth. That's not really scalable. So code reviews are a necessary thing to make that scalable and that workable. And a lot of companies have trouble in adopting them in a successful manner. So doing proper code review is actually hard.
Thanks.
I have one point.
Krisztina.
What we can learn from the open source community.
Last one. Yeah.
Handling my code as it would be open source. So it means documentation, a README file, version numbers, not just throwing up the fence, but really caring for what I'm doing, just like I would do it for an open source project for everybody, because it tends to be fast and shortcuts. And I just saw some code generator. We had 20 repos having all of them had the same README, all of them had the same name. Then please do not include a README. So either you are doing it correctly or let it go. And working carefully. I think open source software is made very careful. It's more than one pet project.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for this chat.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you.
And to everyone, have a nice day, evening, night, morning, wherever you are. And next week we'll have a hands-on session and much more in the planning. So thank you all for tuning in again. And until next time, bye-bye.